when I was 10, I lived in a small village in Ukraine.
How many of you heard of Ukraine? Okay.
You heard of it?
What was your life like?
It was quite happy.
Okay.
But it turned really bad one day. One day my father didn't come home for supper, and I had to go and find out why he wasn't coming home for supper. And I was told that the secret police had come and gotten him and took him away. And my life changed. I felt like I had to grow up and be a very responsible person. I couldn't believe it that we could live without my father. Anyway, I never saw him again. So that was a very tragic day for me when I was 10.
Did you know that day that you wouldn't see him again?
No, I didn't. I know that he was taken to the county seat and they were interrogating him. You know what that means, interrogate. And he was charged of being guilty of sabotage. And I won't go into the story, but the war had started with Germany 2 days before this happened. And because we were German, we were suspect, and the government thought that what happened, he had done that on purpose. He was the head of the collective farm, dairy farm. You know, we didn't own livestock like you do, like Maynard did. It was a the government owned everything and we worked for the government. And he was the head of this collective dairy farm. And they were to deliver X number of liters of milk that year. And the cows did not deliver milk because there was no pasture. It was very dry, and you know what it means to be dry and dusty in the fields. And so the cows didn't give enough milk, and my father was worried. So the two young herdsmen, they were a little bit older than you, I think 14 and 16, they took the herd of cattle onto an alfalfa field. And I don't know how many of you are farmers, but when you let cows graze on an alfalfa field for very long, it's not good for them. They bloated up, big stomachs. And he had told the boys to just leave him there for 10 minutes and then take him to the next pasture. But the boys fell asleep and forgot about the cows. And when they woke up, some of them were not feeling good and they had to be slaughtered. And they took the food away from the village. We didn't get the meat. But anyway, the government decided that my father had done that on purpose, helping the Germans. It's probably too complicated to understand. But anyway, that's what happened when I was 10 years old.
So, Maynard, what were you doing this morning?
I had a cow or a steer that it was bloating this morning. They had done that, got into stuff that made him bloat real big.
So
and they die real quick if you don't do something.
So if we had been living in that kind of situation, like she just described, you could have been taken away because of a bloated cow.
Mm-hmm.
And we could have never seen you again.
That would have been bad.
I mean, this is the reality of what Justina lived with. That was her world, okay?
So then 2 years later, the German army came in and occupied where I live, our village, not 2 years later. It was the same year, but 2 years later, the German army retreated, they went back. The Russians were chasing them back. And we, our village, the whole village decided to leave with them. And I have a few pictures to show you how we went.
So you just left your home?
We left
You
our
left
home.
everything there, or did
We
you?
piled our belongings onto a wagon. Our belongings consisted of our bedding, and my mother took a sewing machine and a clock with us. And it was in October, just like now, October 22nd. And we walked away and taking our sheep and cattle with us. But the first day that this whole village was lined up to leave to go west, we were strafed by airplanes. You know what that means? They're flying above us and shooting, aiming at us, we thought. And we went into the ditches, lay in the ditches, until the shooting quit. And then we went back to our wagons. I think Carol showed you a picture of the
Yeah.
wagons all
Same one
lined
you
up.
have,
Yeah. And anyway, we found that nobody, not one single person from our village was killed. But the sheep that I showed you here before and our cattle, they were all gone. They were dispersed, they were spooked and ran away. And so we lost all of them. Our milk cow and all the cattle.
And you were just walking?
I was walking, and the shoes I had were homemade sandals, wooden soles with a strip of leather across. And then initially in October it was still warm, but when it got cold and I had to put on my mother's home knit stockings, all of our stockings or socks were knit at home. And when it got, here it shows we're eating breakfast. We made a little fire, and we didn't have coffee, we had trips. That's something like postum. And my mother had brought along toasted zwieback and spare ribs and sausage, because we butchered a hog, and also killed many chickens and fried them. And so we didn't stop to eat. We walked and we ate most during the day. But this was in the morning, and somebody made coffee, I think. Well, it wasn't coffee, it was crepes. Here's another one, shows us. And then in late October, it started to rain. It was getting cold and it rained, and we walked in mud and more mud. Can you see that? How many of you have horses at home? You do? So you know what they're like. Well, that was our manner of transportation. I had never seen a car before then. There were no cars. Here, more mud.
And you're walking all day
And
long.
we're walking, and I'm losing my schlotter. My sandals were called schlotter in Low German. And sometimes they just got stuck in the mud. Here you see a German soldier is helping us help the horses. You know, most of the fathers in our village were arrested and gone by the time we left. So it was mostly mothers with kids like you. And I had 2 older brothers who were with us, but most of them were just very young people. You can see the mud. was, and it got cold. Now here's a boy, maybe a little bit older than you are. Any of you have older brothers? I think he may be 14 or so. He's in charge of the wagon and of the family, because
Wow,
you can see how the horses struggle
wow.
to keep going, because there's the mud and the snow is coming.
You didn't,
And
probably
it's
didn't have much
cold.
for the horses to eat either, did you?
Pardon?
You probably didn't have much for the horses to eat?
On our wagon, we had some oats, but every night when we stopped for the night, we went looking in the fields to find something for them to
Right.
eat. Yeah, and water was very important to keep them. So, as the trek continued, as we were on the journey, horses died, people died, mostly babies and old people, they got sick. You know, we walked every day and we never undressed. We wore the same clothes. Well, we didn't have clothes other than what we had on. And we never washed ourselves, we never brushed our teeth. And when it got colder, we looked for barns, big collective farm barns where we could sleep for the night, because it might snow, it might sleet. And so we would find a big barn and stay the night there, again, never undressing, sleeping on straw. And guess what we got? Lice. Have any of you had lice? No. Well, the lice, not only in our hair, but in our bodies, and our clothes, they loved us because we couldn't ever clean up. I guess that's it, maybe. Okay, now I'm getting to the shoes. After we arrived in Poland, we were sent through a delousing process. All our clothes were taken away and we had to take showers. What do you call that? Can't think of the word. Not sterilize, but
Sanitize.
sanitize, yeah.
Yeah.
So we all, young children and old grandmas, we all had to undress and go through these showers to rid us of lice and so on. And our baggage and our clothes were sterilized or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I will make this story short, but anyway, by the next year, I ended up living in France. My older brother had gone to France. He was an engineer and was working in a factory and had good money and had an apartment, whereas we were in a refugee camp in Poland. He invited my mother to come and stay with them, but she said, no, I can't leave the family, but I'll send Justa. That was my name, Justa, Justina. And I was your age, a little bit older. I was 14 by then. And I was scrawny, full of lice, and very undernourished. And so she said, I'll send her. And so an older brother took me to France to live with this other brother. And I had no shoes by then. I had a slip made from an army blanket. Feel this. My mother made a slip for me. Can you imagine what that felt next to your body? And the lice had invaded this too. They loved it. And so you would just scratch all the time. It was just miserable.
I'm gonna pass it around. Anybody else wanna feel it? That, imagine having underwear made out of that, okay? Underwear.
Yeah, that would be your
Yeah,
underwear.
that would be your underwear. Scratchy, and it has lice in it.
And I had no shoes. We were in France. I had no shoes. And we had no food. And one day, an American soldier, he was black, his name was Richard. He came past our house, and my sister-in-law and I were sitting on the front steps. And my sister-in-law said this, you know, we didn't speak English. And so she showed him that we wanted something to eat. And that evening, he came to our apartment and brought us leftovers from the kitchen. He was a cook in the American Army. And so that's how we survived for months, quite a few months in France. And my sister-in-law told them also that I didn't have any shoes. And he brought me a pair of soldier shoes. Now these aren't the ones, but these are almost like it. Can you want to try them on?
You were supposed to wear those, right? They're big.
I wore them.
You wore them.
I wore them for years, even after I worked for MCC.
But your feet are so much smaller than that.
Well, these are a little bit bigger.
Yeah, but still.
Oh,
soldiers-
yeah. And my feet were narrow, and I just sort of hobbled them around. Anyway, but kept my feet warm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wore them for many years, well, not many years, but for a long time until MCC came. I'm leaving out a lot of stuff in the interest of time. But one day, we got a visitor. It was somebody from MCC. And my brother told them that we were in danger of being sent back to Russia. I had already been arrested. I was 14 years old, and I was wearing braids on my head, and I was working for a lady, and she had gone to Paris to do some shopping, and I was supposed to meet her at the train station. So I went to the train station to meet her, and while I was there, 4 men came towards me and asked me where I was born. Now, why would they do that?
Because they were from they thought you might be from a different place. They might want to
Exactly,
arrest you.
exactly. You're right. I was wearing braids, and that was not a custom in France, but it was in Russia. So they had spotted me, and at that time, the American government and the Russian government and British, I guess.
Yeah, it was British.
British had decided that anybody who had left that country, Russia, needed to go back there. Well, we didn't want to go back there. But we were considered traitors. And so if we went back, my brother said, we'll end up in Siberia. That's probably where my father is. But Siberia was for us the scariest place we could think of, because nobody ever came back from Siberia alive. So my brother didn't want to go back. Anyway, these men found me on the street and they took me to the Russian headquarters and I was interrogated. They were preparing papers for me to go back. And while I was talking to this Russian officer, somebody burst into the room, and it was one of those policemen that had taken me there. And he said, "You have to release her. It's illegal for you to arrest her and to send her back." And they argued a while, and then finally they let me go, and this secret policeman accompanied me to our apartment. And my brother came in, dragged me inside and said, "Now we have to go into hiding." What I didn't know is that my brother had told the police who had come to our apartment, that he was my father. And that he was an old immigrant. Old immigrants who had come to France after the First World War were exempt from being taken back. I didn't know that. And he had false papers. And he had bribed this secret policeman with some 3 packages of American cigarettes, that he would give him the cigarettes if he would go and get me out of from the Russian officer. So that's what I'm worth. 3 packages of American cigarettes. Anyway, my brother didn't smoke. He had gotten them through care packages. That's how he had those. Anyway, we went into hiding. And then not long after that, we had to leave the hiding place because the people were afraid that they would be arrested if they were found hiding us. So we went back to our apartment. And not long after that, somebody came to visit us. And his name was Peter Dick. I'm sure you haven't heard of him, but Maynard has.
Oh, yeah.
And he helped us get out of France to Holland, where we were safe. And that's how it happened that I came here. While in Holland, I worked for MCC, and I was still wearing those.
You were.
But the first shipment of clothing that you guys, your grandparents sent, that your grandparents sent clothing and food over there after the war. Well, I got some shoes, some real shoes. Never had real shoes. I mean, the kind that fitted me, So I am so thankful for MCC. I wouldn't be here if they hadn't come at that time to get us. Because we heard later from neighbors that the people who had arrested me, the Russians, had come to our apartment to pick us up. And we would not be here. So thank you.
Yeah. And now, years later, her story is being repeated in Ukraine, because Ukraine was a part of Russia at that time. And so now there's again this conflict going. We have a war going there again. And Justina is one story, one young girl. And today, still, now again, since the Russians have invaded Ukraine, we again have stories like this happening right now. And we have MCC is there working again now to help people. Literally millions of people, they estimate around 14 million people are on their move and moving out. It's like the story recently of Olga, who was in Donetsk in Ukraine. The war is coming in, the Russians are moving in. She took her 3 daughters, and she was an exchange student here in Marion, Kansas. She took her 3 daughters, she was an exchange student back in 2002. But she took her 3 daughters, put them in her car, and what she could get in her car, and she was moving west to an unknown safe location. Like you moved west toward Poland. There are now again people moving west out of Russia, out of Ukraine, into Poland. And like she was saying, she didn't know she could be so angry when she looked in the mirror as she was driving away and watched her husband and their car disappear in her rearview mirror, not knowing whether she will ever see them again. And Justina never saw her dad again. And I don't know if these girls will ever see their dad again because he had to stay back and fight. And so those conflicts around the world are still going on. And MCC is still responding to people who are because of conflict. And the same is happening now this week in Palestine and in Israel.
Yeah, I saw.
Go ahead.
They're interesting. They have like donkeys of all animals. Donkeys carry these like little tiny carts.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's how they're leaving.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There was very little cars,
Yeah,
and a lot of people were walking.
yeah. The same story as what she was talking about back in the 1940s is happening right now in God. So today, as you go out on your walk, you might think about the people, the millions of people, and the children, and the young people that are your age, that are walking out of Gaza for safety because Israel is bombing their homes and everything that they own. So they're putting things in their donkey carts, like you say, in their carts, and it was on TV. All these donkeys were pulling these with even wooden wheels.
Yeah.
Wooden wheels on these wagons, pulling their stuff out of Gaza. And a lot of people are elderly that can't go. And that's what's happening right now in Zaporozhye. MCC every day is feeding 14,000 people in Zaporozhye. And they get a bowl of soup and 1 piece of bread every day. And these are all people who are disabled or elderly that can't walk out of town or find a ride because there is no transportation to get out of town. So as you walk today, think about that. And I think you're raising money today for water, right? Water project. And that's another whole issue we can talk about sometime, about all the water issues around the world and how that affects people and people's lives. And so today, as you will walk and you raise this money, to us it's just money. But for someone, it's literally life. Because water is essential for living. And I have lots and lots of stories where MCC is working around the world to help with water projects, so people, to give them a quality life. And so thank you for what you're doing. I mean, because you are touching the lives of people today when you walk. I mean, it is every dollar that you contribute is touching the life of somebody. So thank you for those people. And I wish you could meet some of those people. And you had a real privilege this morning to be able to meet Justina. That she actually experienced this trauma of war, and that has always been a part of her life. All her life, it's been a part of who she is.
Do any of you have questions after listening to Justina about, Micah, what would?
Did you ever get tired of walking?
Yes, very tired.
I mean, I was like,
And my older brother, who's 17, he was the head of the family now. And I begged to go sit on the wagon. My mother and my grandma were sitting on the wagon. And I begged and cried, and he wouldn't let me because the horses couldn't pull us. You know, the wagon was too heavy. So what I did, I sneaked around to the back and I held on.
Oh, wow,
So the wagon would pull me.
wow.
Very tired. Yeah.
How did you entertain yourself?
Pardon?
Did you have a way to entertain yourself?
You know,
Entertainment,
Like-
what did you do for any
Did
entertainment?
you have any like entertainment?
my entertainment was trying to find sticks of wood so that we could make a fire. Otherwise, there was no entertainment, no. Or when we stopped, looking for water, because the horses needed water and we needed water. That was our entertainment. As we drove along and we had eaten all the food that we brought from home, we had to look into the fields to see if there may be something left over, maybe a pumpkin or a beet or any kind of vegetable that we could eat, cook.
Your entertainment was survival.
Yeah.
Literally survival.
So exactly, the wagon's going like 2 or 3 miles per hour. Would that like take a month to get like across? If you go this way, it takes at least a month to get across. Like,
Took
up and down
months.
Kansas?
Months. How fast would a wagon go?
Yeah.
As fast as a horse can go.
Just walk.
Walking.
But sometimes the roads were clogged. The first night that we had left our village, the first night we got to a city and we couldn't go any further because the roads were all clogged with military, with tanks and big trucks and so on, so we had to stop there for the night. And that night, the city we were on the outskirts went up in flames. Both of the fronts were right there in the city. And I thought that was the last of my life. I thought that's where I would die.
So you were scared all the time?
All the time, we never knew when we would be shot at.
Yeah. Did you think was there a time when you thought you may not make it?
Twice. The first day when we were strafed and we lay in the ditches, and then that night, those were the closest, that night that we were close to the city of Creeley Road, and the city was completely in flames.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of like,
We want to thank Justina. I'd like to take you all's picture with Justina. Why don't you gather around her, okay, so I can see everybody?
Oh, I want to picture too.
It's your choice, however you want to be.
Whatever makes you look good. That's great.
I have $10.
93. Good question, Eve. Justina is 93. Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Older than your grandma.
Yeah, that's right.
You want me to take a picture too? Very good.
There you go. You just want to stand there in the
Yeah, just
against the
stand there
wall.
around with her
Around her,
there,
with-
so.
around her, yeah.
You're taller than
There you go. I love it.
Daniel's talking.
Let me see where, we sure we can see everybody.
Everybody put this way.
Eve, get in there.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
good.
Good.
Okay. Simeon, I was almost not seeing you. Get Harper, lean that way. Between Nathan and Boston, yeah.
This is great. Wonderful.
Very good.
Wow.
You guys are amazing. You listen so well. Thank you. Next Sunday's a field trip to the fire station. If we owe you money, hit me up in Maynard.
Yeah.
I've got money for you.
Carol's got money for you.
You owe me money.
Just leave your plates and we'll.
I need my money from
you.
Martha? Oh my goodness. Is she back?
Yeah, it's over here.
She is.
You owe me money.
I know. Yeah, you could
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not
My
happy
granny
with
sons
you
are
about that.
Thank you.
Happy here today?
No.
I mean, sure